Welcome to the Digital Concert Hall. This is an extraordinary concert tonight, a mixture of almost unknown pieces by Hugo Wolf, together with perhaps one of the best-known symphonies in the entire repertoire, Mahler's Second Symphony, The Resurrection. And what is the connection between these two composers? It's a very important one. They knew each other in Vienna at the beginning of their lives and at the end of their lives. Wolf and Mahler met as students and they got on very well together, and then they didn't see each other for a very long time, though Alma Mahler tells us quite a lot in her letters and her writings about Wolf's very rackety and rather peculiar life and how he contracted syphilis and a whole variety of life problems that he had. Later they met again, and now it was towards the end of Wolf's life. Wolf only lived to be 43 years old, and towards the end of his life he had a lot of mental problems. He was twice incarcerated in a lunatic asylum, and just before the second occasion, Mahler and Wolf met in Vienna. Now, Wolf was being looked after in Vienna. People were giving him money, providing him with a flat, making sure he had the opportunities to write. And meanwhile, Mahler, whose career as a conductor was extraordinarily successful, Mahler had become conductor of what is now the State Opera, the court opera in Vienna. And on a terribly sad occasion, Wolf, who now was losing his reason, thought that it was him, Wolf, who had been given this job as conductor of the State Opera, and it was as a result of some terrible public moment where he announced that he himself was conductor of the opera and had actually taken Mahler's job that he was finally incarcerated and died a few months later. There is a wonderful connection also between Berlin, the Berliner Philharmoniker, Wolf and Mahler. I guess the Mahler connection is pretty obvious. Mahler himself conducted his works with this orchestra, and the orchestra is known worldwide for their interpretations of these symphonies over the years with many great conductors. The Wolf connection is more tenuous. Wolf's marvellous little miniatures that we're going to do tonight were premiered here by the Berliner Philharmoniker. That was 130 years ago, and they haven't been performed here since. So it's a real festival tonight when we do these pieces and show how wonderful they are. These are pieces that are almost entirely forgotten. Indeed, it was only in 1996 that a critical edition became available of the pieces for choir and orchestra by Wolf, of which there are just 6 pieces. Wolf was a great fan of Wagner, and Wolf himself wanted to write opera. He wrote 3 operas. They're not really complete in every case, and the last one only exists in fragments. Tonight's concert opens with what would have been the opening chorus of his last opera. It was left uncompleted by Wolf and was finished by friends. It's simply called, in this version, Frühling oder Frühlingschor, Spring Chorus. It only lasts 5 minutes. It's absolutely glorious. The poem, as so often with Wolf, is he has taken a poem that is full of imagery, absolutely packed with imagery. And what Wolf does is he illustrates every word as well as the big feeling of the poem. The music, therefore, is extremely dense. The orchestra has a marvellous introduction that gives us the picture of spring opening. We hear the timpani going yum bum 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 bum. There's a sort of excitement that something's going to happen. And then the poem begins, and the choir is divided into 3 groups, rather oddly, rather unusually. The tenors are the most important people. They begin and they sing in duet with the women. And what are the basses doing? Well, in the original, the basses weren't in this piece at all. And the friends that completed the piece thought it was rather strange not to employ the basses in the choir, so they've added parts of the basses, and they really double the cellos and the double basses. So there's this rather curious 3-part texture. And the choir tells the story, and they tell it with such fine detail that is illustrated by orchestral colour all over the place. And at the end of it, there is no doubt that here in February, that spring is on its way and that everything will be good. The problem with this piece is, as you'll see, it's relatively short. And so we are going to go straight into the Elfenlied, the fairies' song, which is from, again, an uncompleted work. Wolf wanted to write a sort of play with incidental music on A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, but he only wrote a tiny bit of the music. But we have this glorious fairies' song. And we hear, of course, the Midsummer Night's Dream of music of Mendelssohn in the background, but it's much more complicated in Wolf. The orchestra is bigger, the detail is bigger, the characterization is more detailed, every word is illustrated. It's for soprano soloist, women's choir, and marvellous, marvellous orchestration. But again, it's over in less than 5 minutes. And so we're going then straight into this glorious piece called Der Feuerreiter, the Fire Rider. Now, this piece is best known as a solo song for piano and singer, and that, of course, is where Wolf is principally famous, for writing these glorious miniatures. What he wanted to do, though, was to be better known in the concert hall, in the orchestral concert hall, so he made this extraordinary orchestration of it. Now we hear Wagner, we hear Schumann, we hear Schubert. And again, as I keep on saying, the extraordinary thing is that every word is detailed. It's extraordinarily dense, the texture. With the choir, we've taken days to make sure that every word comes through clearly, that we know exactly in this measure the altos are important, that everyone else must get out of the way to let the sopranos through here. And Simon Rattle has also worked with the orchestra in exactly the same way, so that we see and understand every tiny detail in this song. Also, the song is written at a very fast speed for just a pianist and one singer. We've now got some 200 people on stage trying to do it at the same tempo, and so it takes hours of rehearsal to make sure we can get this extraordinary transparency. And Simon Rattle has decided to put the three pieces together like a suite, like a three-movement symphony. So we're trying to go from one straight into another, to give an idea of an introductory symphony, the symphony, if you like, that Wolf never wrote. Now, Wolf wrote one piece that is well known for orchestra. He wrote fragments of a cantata. He wrote bits of operas, but it's actually in his songs that we will all know him. And he, all his life, felt that he would not really be a great composer until he'd mastered the great forms. But his temperament just wasn't right for it. Whereas Mahler is the total opposite. The 10 great symphonies, the huge pieces for soloist and orchestra. Now, I'm very much hoping that the public reaction to these pieces of Wolf will be similar to that at their premiere here in Berlin some 130 years ago. Wolf was astonished. The public was ecstatic about these pieces. One or two of them were immediately repeated in the concert, and apparently the applause went on for 10 minutes, with Wolf endlessly being recalled to the stage. Why was there this level of excitement? Well, I guess the public here in Berlin really knew their poetry and could see what extraordinary things had been done with the poetry by this wonderful composer. And I suppose one thing I would love to do in the future, along with this orchestra and this choir, would be to immortalise these three pieces and the three others on disc. But the problem is, it's always chicken and egg, isn't it? If you have wonderful pieces that are unknown, how can you ever make them popular? And they grow out of tradition. There is a tradition for these short pieces in the German history. Particularly Schumann wrote some wonderful pieces, a Nachtlied, for example. Again, just 5 or 6 minutes long, Mignon. There are these little pieces, and also by Brahms, Schicksalslied, and many others, pieces that hardly get performed these days because there's no very obvious place for them in the concert hall. So let's hope tonight does something for the reputation of Wolf as a master of the bigger forms, something that he would so dearly have wanted. So what can we say about Mahler? Well, of course, we all know these symphonies. Mahler too, what a fantastic piece. Such a huge scale, all the things that the Wolf isn't. it lasts a very long time. It's for a massive orchestra, for choir that is only used at the last few minutes, for 2 soloists, for offstage orchestra. All of life is here. We understand everything to do with Viennese life. We hear bands practicing in the distance. We hear people in the street. We hear people practicing instruments in their rooms. We hear military bands walking by. Everything is there. The scale of it is absolutely enormous. Also, though, like Beethoven, Mahler felt the need to use a chorus and soloists because somehow the whole picture wasn't complete until you'd also used words. There are choirs and voices in several Mahler symphonies, and I've been lucky enough to train the choirs for Simon Rattle for 30 years now in these pieces. There is a great quotation about Simon Rattle, which is that he became a conductor because he so badly needed to conduct Mahler's Second Symphony. And in the biography of him by Nicholas Kenyon, we hear how Simon, as a young man, just 11 years old, took the score out of Liverpool Public Library and followed Sir Charles Groves's rehearsals with the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra and took the score home and read it and read it. Now, most children read fairy stories or exciting cowboy stories by torchlight under the bedclothes when they've been told to go to bed. Simon Rattle was also told to go to bed. He also took a book and a torch to bed, but it was Mahler's Second Symphony. And we read in the book how he laughed at the orchestration and looked and gloried in all the details of the score and dreamed one day of doing it himself. And he was only 19 years old when he first assembled an orchestra and actually conducted this piece. So, there's a lifetime of experience that goes into Simon Rattle's performances of Mahler's Second Symphony, and he's conducting an orchestra that has been performing it since Mahler's time. I don't think we could have a more powerful combination.